Good morning. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Orient Chronograph reference RA-KV0303B10B. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in. I paid £109 for the watch and I bought it from Amazon. So the watch comes in this white cardboard outer box, and inside the white cardboard outer box one gets the watch box. Now the first thing I want to credit Orient with is producing an excellent quality watch box, bearing in mind the low tier price point of the watch at only £109. The watch box is made from plastic, it has a hinged lid, and the lid of the watch box has a brushed stainless steel plate which is pop riveted in the four corners. And it's a very aesthetically pleasing watch box, and it's actually better quality than one would expect for this low tier price point. So the lid of the watch box is hinged and inside the watch box is fully lined with a satin effect fabric. So the watch itself sits on a padded pillow cushion. So very well presented and very good quality watch box that one would keep. With regards to the other items that you get with the watch comes with an international guarantee booklet. The watch is guaranteed for 2 years, which I think is very good, bearing in mind the price point of the piece. And also one gets a very comprehensive owner's manual. Now this owner's manual is translated into multiple foreign languages, and it goes into detail how to operate the quartz movement used in the piece. So very useful read if you're unfamiliar with quartz movements. And lastly, one also gets this plastic tag with the watch which has the Orient brand logo in silver, and on the reverse of the tag one sees the barcode and the reference number of the piece. So with regards to the watch itself, the first thing I'm going to say is that this is a champagne watch for lemonade money. When I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet 2 criteria. The watch should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price points, and I'm pleased to report that this watch does meet both of those criteria. At only £109, it certainly is excellent value, and I also consider it to be excellent quality, bearing in mind that it's a low tier piece. The watch is very aesthetically pleasing, and the build quality and the case finishing throughout are of a very high standard, and I was actually pleasantly surprised just how good the case polishing is on this watch. So with regards to the specification of this Orient Chronograph, the piece is a 40mm case and it's 10mm thick, so it's quite a slender piece. It wears with a low profile on the wrist due to having a flat stainless steel case back which is pressed on rather than screwed on. It has a 22mm lug width which I think perfectly balances the head of the piece. At 40mm, really this is a watch that would suit collectors with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches and also collectors with a larger wrist of 7 to 8 inches respectively. Really 22mm is the perfect lug width and strap size for a 40mm piece. It perfectly balances the case size. I think 22mm on a 40mm case is a very well balanced design. So with regards to the rest of the specification, this is 50 meters water resistant, and I think that that's perfectly acceptable, bearing in mind that it has a push-pull solid stainless steel crown which has a coin edge finish to it and 2 pushers to operate the chronograph. Really one can't expect better than 50 meters of water resistance with 2 pushers. The problem with pushers is that they don't provide the same level of hermetic seal as a screw down or push-pull crown. With a push-pull crown, one can attain 100 meters of hermetic seal to the case. Really, if one wants 200 meters plus water resistance, one has to use a screw-down crown. But with regards to the pushers, they are well executed, they work well, and I'm confident that they would provide an effective hermetic seal to 50 meters, as does the pressed-on stainless steel case back. Again, really, if one wants better water resistance, one has to use a screw-down case back, which can easily provide a hermetic seal of 200 or 300 meters of water resistance. But bearing in mind that this is intended to be a daily wear piece, it's a chronograph rather than a dive watch, I think that 50 meters of water resistance is perfectly acceptable. So as discussed, this watch comes with a 2-year guarantee, and I think that that's very good, bearing in mind that it only costs £109. Now, one thing I really like about this watch is the flat mineral crystal. Now, one could argue it's a negative that the watch doesn't use hardlex, which is used by Seiko, or alternatively sapphire crystal, which are both more scratch resistant. But personally, I find the mineral crystal to be very aesthetically pleasing, especially when you tilt it at an oblique angle, because it has a large lip which has a bevel on the edge of it, and that lip of the crystal which projects above the bezel really is very eye-catching. It catches the light, as you can see, and refracts the light. So very aesthetically pleasing flat mineral crystal. Yes, it's not as scratch resistant as sapphire crystal, but in terms of the look of it, it's very aesthetically pleasing. I like the dial layout, I like the symmetry of it. Now, interestingly, Orients have decided to place the date complication between the 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock position, and that's actually very functional. When you wear the watch on the wrist, it's easy to read the date window at the between 4 and 5 o'clock indexes. I actually like it. I think it works very well because it maintains the symmetry of the 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock subdials. The dial itself has a very beautiful matte metallic sunburst finish which actually changes colour in the light. I also like the fact that the subdials are slightly recessed into the dial, they don't sit flush with the dial, so that gives the dial a 3D dimensional aspect. And I also like these symmetrical applied indices which are beautifully executed. They're silver, and really the symmetry of the dial makes it clearly legible, and it's also very pleasing to look at. So it's a quartz piece. Now, some collectors would be critical of a quartz because it has a ticking second hand rather than a sweeping second hand of a manual wind or automatic mechanical movement. Personally, I don't regard it to be a negative. I think that quartz chronographs are perfectly acceptable. So with regards to the quartz chronograph movement used in this watch, it uses the quartz caliber RMD00. So the RMD00 is an in-house movement made by Orient in Japan, and it has a stated accuracy of plus or minus 20 seconds per month, which is perfectly acceptable. And the battery life of the quartz movement is a maximum of 3 years, which again I think is perfectly acceptable. Now, the 3-year stated battery life for this watch is on the basis of you using the chronograph complication up to 30 minutes per day during that 3-year period. So I think that's actually quite a good battery life for a quartz chronograph. Often it's the case that quartz-powered chronograph watches are generally quite power-hungry, and although the battery life is stated as 3 years, in real terms that means 1 to 2 years. So it's a negative that one has to frequently replace the batteries on quartz-powered chronographs, because running the extra subdials as well as the 3 hands on the watch, they tend to use up a lot of power from the battery. So I really think that to get a 3-year power reserve out of this quartz caliber RMD00 is perfectly acceptable. So overall, I like the case finishing. The bezel is polished to a flawless mirror finish throughout. In between the lugs is also mirror polished to a flawless finish, and I think one has to give due credit to Orient that they haven't cut any corners with regards to production costs. It's often the case that watch manufacturers will neglect to polish in between the lugs. They will just simply leave it brushed satin finish, alternatively just a machine finish, because it's an area that isn't seen when the watch is worn on a bracelet. But I'm pleased to report that Orient has polished in between the lugs to a high standard, which is the case throughout the case of the watch. The flanks of the case have a lovely curved profile, and also they have a flawless mirror finish which beautifully complements the mirror finish of the bezel and also the pressed on case back. With regards to the strap, it's calf leather. The quality of the strap is very good. The stitching is flawless, and it's quite a supple leather. Usually when one gets a new watch, the leather strap is quite stiff, and it actually takes a lot of wear to break the strap in to get it comfortable on the wrist. And bear in mind that this is a 22mm strap, so it's quite a thick strap. It's actually very supple, bearing in mind the thickness. So the quality is good, the execution is good, the stitching is perfect. There are no imperfections to the finish of the strap. It actually is like a strap that one would get on a higher tier piece, and I really like it. It's genuine calf leather, and I just think that it's a credit to Orient that again they haven't cut any corners. The leather strap has two keepers, one slides and one is fixed. The buckle is solid stainless steel, and as you can see, it is signed with the Orient brand logo. Very well engraved, and overall the quality of the buckle and also the strap itself is just very good. I'm absolutely delighted with it. I think that really for £109 the quality of this watch is exceptional. I think that the build quality, the quality control, the case finishing, the polishing, and just overall the look of the watch, it really does exceed its price point. So with regards to the chronograph function, there are two pushers. There are three subdials. Now, the right-hand subdial is a 24-hour subdial, and one could argue that that 24-hour subdial really is negligible in terms of performance because it is set to the 12-hour hands of the watch. So, for example, it just gives a readout of the 24-hour time that the watch is currently showing with a three-hand analog display. But one presses the top pusher to activate the chronograph, to stop it, and also to start it again. As you can see, if you look at the bottom subdial, you'll see the seconds hand ticking away on the 6 o'clock subdial. So one starts and stops the chronograph with the top pusher, and one presses the bottom pusher to reset. And as you can see, the subdials will then reset, pressing that bottom chronograph. So it does work, and I'm pleased to report that the hands on the 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock subdials do align perfectly. They do reset to 12 o'clock. The alignment is perfect. As I've discussed, the right hand subdial at 3 o'clock continues to be synchronized with the three hands on the watch, the analog display. So that doesn't reset to 12, it keeps running to the hour of the three hands. So if you're looking for a low price tier piece, if you have a budget of under £150 or €150, really I think this Orient Chronograph, which is quartz powered, cannot be beaten because it's a good looking watch, and really it gives good feel good factor. Because of that, it's a very well executed symmetrical dial design. I like the applied indices as I've discussed, and they really contrast beautifully with that matte sunburst dial. The slight 3D effect of having recessed subdials really does complement the dial layout. I like the shape of the hands as well. They really do balance the applied indices. I think they're very well executed. I also like the silver applied Orient brand logo at 12 o'clock, and most notably I think that it's good that Orient hasn't over-branded the watch with text or specification. It simply says Orient Chronograph at 12 o'clock. There's no other specification. They haven't cluttered the dial by putting quartz on it or stating that it's a 50-meter water resistant piece, because really these aspects of the specification are negligible. So overall I think it's very good looking. So I'll give you a wrist shot. Now, one could argue a negative to the watch is that the strap will only fit up to a maximum of a 7.5-inch wrist. I have a large 8-inch wrist, and as you can see, the strap just engages the tang in the last hole of that strap. So if you're a collector with a 7 to 7.5-inch wrist, the strap will just fit. But if you are a collector with an 8-inch plus wrist, then you'll need to fit a longer length strap, as one would expect. But for the majority of collectors, the strap on the watch is perfectly acceptable. For example, if you have a 6 to 7 or even 7.5-inch wrist, the strap on the watch will fit. But just bear that in mind if you're a collector with a larger wrist. So as you can see, 40mm case, and it fits my 8-inch wrist beautifully. The shape of the curved lugs on the case really do wrap around the wrist very well. So although it has a 22mm lug width, which is quite large, it does balance the head of the piece very well. I really think that the 22mm strap balances the head of that 40mm piece to perfection. I really like that when one tilts the dial at an oblique angle, the matte sunburst dial reflects the light beautifully, and also the subdials also have a concentric sunburst finish, so they also reflect the light very nicely. The light contrast of the applied indices and also the silver finished hands, just very well executed, very aesthetically pleasing. And my favourite aspect, as I've discussed, is the lip of that mineral crystal which projects above the mirror polished bezel. I really like the way the edge of the mineral crystal catches the light. It's just very eye-catching, and also I like the way that the light reflects off the silver applied indices and those subdials. It's just a very good looking watch, and bearing in mind that it's only £109, I really think that it cannot be beaten in terms of the comfort, the fit. Now, one thing I like about it is the low profile aspect of it. It's only 10mm thick, so it's a very slender watch, and this watch would easily fit underneath a shirt cuff. So it's incredibly practical if you're intending to wear the watch as a daily wear piece, because it will slip underneath a shirt cuff with no problems whatsoever. The flat pushed on stainless steel case back and also that flat mineral crystal mean that it is a very low profile piece, and that's something that's very pleasing. If you want a watch that is low profile and is comfortable on the wrist, it does give good feel-good factor, because you don't have any worries with regards to wearing dress shirts, for example, or double cuff shirts, because if worn as a daily wear piece, this watch will easily fit underneath those cuffs. So overall, I think it's a very well executed piece. So what are the negatives? Well, as I've discussed, it has a mineral crystal which isn't as scratch resistant as sapphire. It has a push-pull crown rather than a screw-down crown, so one could argue that those are negatives. A 50 meters water resistance I think is perfectly acceptable, because you're not going to take this watch underwater, swimming, diving, or for example in the bath or shower. I think that that's acceptable. One could argue that the pushed-on stainless steel case back is a negative, because it's not as effective in terms of hermetic seal as a screw-down case back would be, but really for a daily wear piece that's a chronograph, I think a pressed-on case back is acceptable. With regards to the execution of the stainless steel case back, it's actually very aesthetically pleasing, because it has this vertically brushed satin finish to it. And that's something quite unusual. One often sees mirror polishing to case backs, or circular concentric satin finishing to a stainless steel case. But I actually like the way that the vertical brushed stainless steel case back catches the light when you tilt it at an angle. It gives it an interesting finish. It's beautifully laser engraved with the Orient brand logo and also the specification of the piece, such as it's water resistant to 50 meters and it's stainless steel, and it also details that the movement is made in Japan by Epson. Seiko Epson are the parent company of Orient, and Epson manufacture the in-house movements, the quartz caliber RMD00 used in this watch. Overall, I think the execution of the build quality, the quality control and the case polishing is outstanding throughout. To be honest with you, if this watch was more expensive, if it was £150, I would still say that it is excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. The case shape itself does remind me very much of the Orient Bambino version 4, which I recently reviewed on my channel. So I think if you like the Orient Bambino case shape, but you're looking for a slightly smaller watch, the Orient Bambino is 42mm, so it is a large watch, and it also has a domed mineral crystal, which means it's quite tall. If you want a similar style to the Orient Bambino, but a smaller case at 40mm and also a 10mm thickness, this really is the perfect watch. And I would say that if you're a collector with a 6 to 7 inch wrist, this is the perfect choice. At 10mm thick and 40mm diameter, it really is meant to suit that 6 to 7 inch wrist collector wrist size. And I think you'll find the 22mm strap very comfortable, because it actually spreads the weight of the piece on the wrist. In terms of heft, the watch isn't heavy. It weighs under 80 grams, so it really does give a weightless effect. When you wear this watch on the wrist, it's like not wearing a watch at all. It does have that weightless feel to it. So I would say that the feel-good factor in terms of comfort of wearing this watch is 10 out of 10. It really is a very good looking watch, but it's also incredibly comfortable to wear. So if you're going to be wearing this watch for 8, 10 or even 12 hours per day, it's an incredibly practical piece, because bearing in mind it has a very flat profile to the pushed on stainless steel case back. The laser engraving is flush with that brushed finish, so it sits perfectly smooth and flat on the wrist. There's nothing to rub against the wrist or irritate it. So if you're going to wear this watch for long periods of time, it is an incredibly comfortable piece. And I think comfort is very important. It's often an aspect of watches that isn't discussed in YouTube watch reviews, the feel-good factor and the comfort of a piece. So this is a very lightweight and also very comfortable watch, and in terms of dimensions it's also very low profile at only 10mm thick. So really there are no other negatives to the watch. If you don't mind the fact that the mineral crystal is not as scratch resistant as sapphire, and it has a push-pull crown and also pushed-on case back, which provide hermetic seal to 50 meters, there's nothing else to consider. If you're a collector with a 6 to 7 inch wrist, then the length of the strap is not going to be a problem, as I've demonstrated. It just fits up to my 8-inch wrist. So overall, I think it's a champagne watch for lemonade money, and I'm going to highly recommend it for your consideration. I think this watch is excellent quality and excellent value. It is a heavy hitter. So I hope you've liked my review of the Orient Chronograph. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.